The Peter Jackson King Kong game. I grew up playing the PS2 version. I have a lot of memories and nostalgia like with the PS2 version. But the 360 version was like a version of the game that I have been looking for a long time. I finally found it about a week ago. The Xbox 360 version is going to be more expensive because it is relatively rarer, right? As opposed to the PS2 or original Xbox version. And the main difference between the PS2 and the 360 version is that the 360 version it is gonna look better. So it's gonna have better resolution. It's gonna have better overall graphics. The PS2 version of the game it does include in terms of like more kind of intercut scenes, right? So it does include more scenes in between each chapter, right? And there's like a map representation of how far you go into Skull Island, the farther you go into. Both versions are they're pretty much are the same. Other than that. Now, a King Kong, Peter Jackson's King Kong game is basically, it is based off of the 2005 movie. So, you play as Drac, you play as Kong. It is super epic. I did talk about this game before, years ago. First off, this game is super epic because you can play as Kong. Now, you play a lot more as Drac than you do as Kong. So when you play as Kong, the game is very large scale. The game gets big scale. You have light attacks, heavy attacks. He can grapple, so he can grab enemies. He's able to swing like in this massive forest area. And he does have these unique, very cool finishing moves, right? For example, in the movie, the King Kong 2005 movie, like where Kong breaks the V-Rex's jaw, the T-Rex's jaw, right? He breaks it, he snaps it. That is in this game as well. There's another one where he does lift up a T-Rex. You can just feel at the sheer rage like of the silverback, of the giant silverback, as he just takes down all of these different enemies. It's super epic in that because certain enemies, like for example, the T-Rex, you cannot take down as Drac. You gotta be Kong to take down this enemy. It is very interesting. There's also like in the Kong gameplay, right? If you remember at the end of the movie where they capture Kong, they bring him to New York City. There's also that sequence too, like in the game, but drawn out. But Kong is super epic, right? That is the main draw of this game. You don't play as Kong as often, right? You probably play as Kong in 7 or 8 different times, right? Out of the 27 chapters, different chapters or sequences in the game. You play as Kong, there is this cool, unique ability where you can tap. So if you're on Xbox, you tap Y, right? So you tap Y multiple times, which literally can activate this cool ass this rampage mode, right? So he does more damage, he takes less damage. Sorry, he's able to take more damage, he does more damage, right? And he does move faster. It is super epic, and the screen turns yellow. Now at the other side of the game is play as Drac, right? So play as Drac, right? You get 4 different guns. You get the pistol, you get the shotgun, you get the Tommy gun, and the sniper rifle. My favorite one being the Tommy gun, right? It is the best weapon in the game. There's also the shotgun too as well, which is obviously very useful for up close, right? And the sniper, right, for more far range enemies. For example, bats. Now, like when you play as Drac, you're gonna run out of bullets very quickly, as bullets are very scarce, and you gotta rely on supply drops. Playing as Drac, the game, right? The game takes takes a lot from the movie, but there's not as many characters like in the actual story. But you spend a longer period of time like on the island because they can put a lot more into the game as opposed to the movie. But just the sequences are so immersive, like when you play as Drac, right? Especially like when you're very low on bullets, Drac will say, right, through the dialogue, right, what's his name, Adrian Brody. So the actor will say, he only has so much more ammo or magazines left, right, and it does get more suspenseful, and you gotta really use your ammo very wisely, right, very carefully. The other weapons, there's sticks, right? So there's like these sticks or spears. So there's the long spear, developed spear, and there's a developed spear and there's a short stick spear, right? So the developed spear does more damage, right? It can also last longer. The spears will break over time. They will actually break. So if you're not careful, they will, if you use them too much, they will break. There's also fire. Fire is a big part of the game when you play as Drac. You're basically burning down dried up bushes to kind of make your way through, like a barrier. So they act as a barricade, right? So it's literally like a barricade in the game where if there's a certain dried up bush, kind of like these high kind of grass areas, you cannot cross it, right? You gotta burn it down like with fire. In terms of enemies in the game, there are multiple different enemies in the game, and the biodiversity in the game is very interesting. So there's a Ventosaurus, right? There's Ventosaurus, there's millipedes, there's megapedes, there's giant crabs, there's scorpions, and the V-Rex, and as well bats, small bats, medium-sized bats, and the massive mother bat, a dinosaur. So the enemies, right? It is very interesting how they introduce, the biodiversity and this kind of food chain system, right? So the animals will go after each other, right? And if you use bait, there's like bait. So if you I grab a stick and you poke like a sort of larvae or like some sort of insect, you can get the distract the animals, right? So the animals won't attack you, right? The annoying one being the Ventosaurus, right? So it's like a much smaller version of like a T-Rex, and those ones they can be very annoying, right? Because they will bite you, they will drag you by your feet. In terms of somewhere like the environments, like in terms of swamp or lake areas, right? Sometimes you'll get caught in deep water and you cannot use your weapon, right? Because you have to swim through the deep water, and that's when the alligators come after you. Or sometimes you'll be like on a very narrow platform, a very narrow walkway bridge, and bats will literally come after you and swat after you. So it is very interesting how they make the different environments. One of my favorite, scenes in the game is when you see those massive brachiosauruses, right? So are you going into like the actual like this huge ass canyon, a village, and you see the brachiosauruses walk, right? The same thing like in the movie. It is super epic. The brachiosauruses are themselves, they're not actual enemies in the game. Now, the enemy system like in the game is pretty unique and pretty cool. There's even a giant serpent snake that Kong fights later on in the game, like very to the very end of the game. The game is very interesting. Now, it is gonna have some problems and some issues. First one being the 360 version does come with bugs and glitches, right? I did upload a glitch where there is a dinosaur glitch, like some sort of dinosaur body glitch, and as well, the companion sometimes can be slow to react. The AI can be a little slow to react. Um, Now, granted, this is a much older game. This is a very old game, but another thing too, like with the game, is that there is no run button, right? So it's all walking, right? So like when you play as Jack, it's just all walking, as straight walking, and but yeah, there's no run button. But aside from that, though, the game itself is pretty solid, and it's not a very long game, so it's not super long, right? I wish it was longer, but again, it is a video game based on a movie. There's only so much you can get. Replayability wise, is a replayable game because it is so immersive. It is so suspenseful. There's so many suspenseful moments in the game, memorable moments, especially for me because I have so much nostalgia with this game. It is very replayable, and you can always replay each chapter over and over and over again. There is like this kind of extra showcase mode where it's like some sort of a museum, and then you can go back and look at the different animals or the different kind of landscapes like in the game. So yeah, that is the King Kong game. Please like and subscribe. Thank you.